The partnership between Gimmal and Box provides enterprise-wide records management for Box and other repositories. You can manage all of your physical and electronic records and information in Box and beyond. Automated lifecycle enforcement allows you to implement event, date, and rule-based retention lifecycles across Box and other repositories. And defensible disposition ensures that you have a complete audit trail and destruction certificates when records reach the end of their retention lifecycle. So here we have a Box repository. We're in our Human Resources folder, and we're going to move into our Employees folder. We're going to drag and drop a new document into the Employee folder. The document is uploaded into Box. We click on the document, and you're able to see properties about the file on the right-hand side. You can see information such as the file name, the owner of the file, the descriptor, when it was uploaded, created, modified date, and so forth. This all becomes information Gimmal Records can capture as metadata. Here we click on the file, go to the ellipsis, select metadata, and now we can select a metadata template for HR employee info. We click on the template, we fill in the values from the pull-downs or the key-in fields, and now we have metadata associated to our document that can also be captured from Box by Gimmal Records and used for record classification and retention. In addition to metadata, we can also use classification labels in Box to help further classify records. We move into the ellipsis again, we click on Classify, and now from the pull-down we can select the classification label that we'd like to apply to this particular record. The record has now been marked as confidential. You see that bright in yellow in the user interface, and on the right-hand side in our details pane, we can also see the confidential label. Again, Gimmal Records will pick this up and use it as additional metadata to help classify and retain the record. If we go to our admin console and we look at classification, here's where we can see we have 3 different classification labels set up in our Box environment. If we go to our classification policies, you'll see that for our confidential data, we actually have automated policies that can be applied where that label can be automatically assigned to any document containing PHI, PII, or other confidential information using predefined file criteria set up in Box. If we combine classification with Box Shield, we can also prevent how information can be accessed. Setting up an access policy around our confidential data label allows us to limit who this file can be shared with internally or externally. In this case, we're blocking external collaboration of confidential data. So now let's go to Gimmal Records. And here you can see we're managing records in Gimmal Records in Box as well as in other repositories. We look at this record in Box, we know where the record's at, we can see the record class that it was assigned to. And if we come over and click on the pull down and go to the record overview, we can see more details about this record stored in the Box repository. Here's a unique identifier assigned to it by Gimmal Records. Here's the record class automatically assigned to the record based on its properties. It's an electronic record. Here's where it's located in the Box repository. And based on the record class, here's the retention life cycle that this record has inherited. It'll be kept for 10 years and then disposed of. The properties were captured directly from the Box repository. The Box folder path and enterprise ID. Those system properties that we talked about, the created date, the file name, the folder name, the modified, all of that information. All of the classification information from Box can be captured so we can see exactly which classification policies matched, and at the bottom we'll be able to see our classification label and use that for classification. We can also see all of the values from our metadata template. All of these properties are used by Gimmal Records to trigger retention and classification. If we go to our Manage screen, this is where we can see all of the records in Gimmal Records, including records stored in our Box repository. Off to the right, you can see a number of icons that allow me to see things like, is a record declared and put in a lock state where it can't be disposed of? Has it been added to a legal hold, so it again can't be disposed of while it's on legal hold? Or maybe I want to drill in and look by my record class view, so I can come into my general record schedule, drill into employee management records, see my confidential records, and click the icon to see all of the records in all of the repositories assigned to this specific record class. And again, if I come in, click on the pull down, I can see all of the details about this record. If I go to the File Plan screen, this is where I can set up and manage how records are classified. And we can see I have record classes and subclasses for my different types of records. You'll notice with the icons, I can have things like unique approval groups assigned to an entire category of records. I can have a life cycle and classification rules assigned to a record class. And I can set up properties about how a record class will manage the records in it. Give it a unique title, assign an organization, assign a life cycle, allow record declaration or that record locking we talked about. Choose whether or not records will be archived when they're disposed of, if destruction certificates will be created, how the classification rules are set up. I can control all of this at a record class level, and if I click on the pull down, we can go in and look at the classification rules. Here's where we're using the properties from Box, in this case the Box folder path, to actually classify the record into this record class. We use a variety of different operators, in this case equals, and if the path equals this value, the record will be assigned here if it has a classification label of confidential assigned to it. Now, there are other properties we can use besides box-specific properties. There are other box properties, as well as a variety of other repository or system properties that can be used in classification rules. Once I have records classified, I want them to inherit a retention lifecycle. So I can click on the pull down, I can view all of my available lifecycles. These can be created and stored in a library, and I just select the lifecycle that I want. Lifecycles are created through the same interface, so I can come in here and look at my employee termination lifecycle, and you'll see that it has two distinct phases to it. This is an employee termination based lifecycle. Once an employee is terminated, that event happens, the first thing we're going to do is declare the record and lock it so it can't be disposed of. Then we'll keep the record for 10 years, and then we will do a dispose and delete of that record at the end of its retention lifecycle. The triggers are what allow me to set up different types of retention using labels, dates, and other properties. Employee termination is event triggered. I can't pre-predict it, but I can use date triggers, or I can use rule triggers, where I evaluate properties of the record to initiate retention. And then ultimately, I dispose of my records. So here you can see our disposition inbox, where I can see all records that are eligible for disposition that I have approval authority for. I can scroll through, I can filter, I can sort, but ultimately I can look at the details for any of my records, see, hey, do I want to approve this record for disposition? I can click on the pull down and choose other actions to take on a record besides approve. Maybe I want to reject it. Maybe I want to reclassify it or add it to a legal hold. But ultimately, I want to select one or more records. I can do a multi-select. I click Approve. Once I've approved my records, I'll see the check mark appear, and now I can submit those records for disposition. I can type in a comment about the disposition that I approve this action, for example, confirm that, and the records are removed from my inbox, and Gimmal Records reaches out to the Box repository and deletes those records from Box. If I'm keeping an archive of disposed records, I can see information about the record, not a copy of the document itself, but just the metadata or properties about that record that was disposed of. Plus, I can view the audit trail and the properties. So as I mentioned earlier, we have a detailed audit trail of every action that happened to the record throughout its life cycle, and we can come in and view destruction certificates for our records. So this proves the record was disposed of, who approved it, the date that the record was disposed of, and if I view the destruction certificate as a report, I have the option to actually export that report to a format such as PDF or Excel so I could share it perhaps with non-records managers. Here we'll export out to Excel and we'll save our report. I can actually save that report directly back to my Box repository. And if I do that, I can save the Excel file into Box. I can use tools like Box Relay to actually then initiate a review process or an alert process about that report. We save our file into the Record Reports folder in Box using the integration between Office and Box. We give it a unique name, and now we've saved our file directly to Box. Relay sends out an alert that says, hey, there's a new report available for you to go review. So now as a business user or a manager, I can go out, I can take a look at this report, I can see what's happened, and I can do that directly from my Box folder. So here we're in Box. We go to Box Reports. We click our Record Reports folder where we stored our destruction certificate. And here's our Excel file with our destruction certificate. Thank you for joining us for this demonstration of Box and Gimmal.